this computer. There we go. So I know it's being recorded here.
Just make sure that's reflected on the timestamp, so I know where to find the different presentations when I upload it later.
Sorry.
Really nice taste.
When you say reflected on the timestamp.
Sorry,
Like-
so I usually
So
write.
that was 9:29 that I started recording on this new version.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Just write an approximate time of when each presentation starts, and I can figure it out from there.
Yes, I got you.
Oh, yeah.
Does that look straight?
The bracelet.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
All the elastic. Well, can you do a quorum with, does it have to be physically present?
I don't think we're gonna have a quorum, the physical quorum today.
There's nothing actionable on that.
There's no snow, so we can't declare an emergency.
There's one item we're looking for action on, but if we don't absolutely need it.
How are you?
Yeah, 9:30.
Why don't we get going? Good morning, everybody. This is the meeting of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission Technical Advisory Committee, January 18th at 9:32. So I'm calling the meeting to order. I'm Bruce Thomas, Town of Hooksett. You are
Elizabeth Roby, Town of Hooksett.
Brendan McDowell, City of Manchester.
Ray Rosenthal, Londonderry.
Anthony Summers, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
David Tilton, Commission.
Zach Swift, the commission.
And Herbert Reed, I need Wayne Housel, I'm with the commission as well.
Nate Miller, staff of the commission.
Adam Lesney, staff of the commission.
Tammy Zamoyski, staff of the commission.
Sylvia Von Allock. I'll be the executive director of the commission, just for a change.
out on the web. We have Kristen.
Oh, you want to admit?
Suzanne's letting them in. We just take.
Hi, Kristen Clark, City of Manchester.
Lucy St. John, New Hampshire DOT.
And George.
George Suarez, Town of Derry.
Lucy.
Lucy St. John, New Hampshire DOT.
Craig.
Hi, this is Craig Toss from Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission.
And Suzanne,
Hi, folks. Suzanne, the neighbor, staff of the commission.
and Mike. Mike Zagian. Okay, did I miss anybody?
Andrew. Andrew.
Andrew? Andrew?
Andrew had it.
Andrew had it.
I don't think he's frozen. Andrew, you there? Andrew, say hello.
Hello, Andrew Haddock, Town of Chester.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And sorry, one more, Mark Sunan, Town of New Boston.
There you go.
First up, is review of the notes from November 16th, but we do not have a quorum apparently. So we cannot do those. So under new business, overview of proposed 2024 regional safety performance targets by David Feltman, senior planning and senior transportation.
Actually, we're gonna be switching it up with Tammy going first, because she has another meeting that she has to go to.
Okay, the winter bike.
Yes,
Okay.
so I'm just going to provide a quick 5-minute overview of Winter Bike to Work Day, which is taking place on Friday, February 9th. It is an international holiday. As the new chair of the Complete Streets Advisory Committee, I am actually leading this initiative on a statewide level. So we put together this website for the event this year, and we have a few exciting updates that I just wanted to share with everybody. So if you're not familiar with Winter Bike to Work Day, it's a great opportunity to celebrate the joys of winter biking and encourage new folks to give it a try. I know that Sylvia likes to compare it to the polar plunge. This is also an opportunity to remember that a lot of people, especially in inner city Manchester, rely on biking and walking as a mode of transportation all year round. So this is not just something for the crazy people like me who like to torture themselves. This is actually something that is really important to a lot of people. So on the website, if I can figure out how to scroll here. One new thing that we're doing this year is we're tracking participation by asking people to take a pledge to ride. Our friends down at REI Bedford have donated 5 really nice backpacks to offer as an incentive to sign up to take the pledge. When you take the pledge, your destination gets entered on this nifty little map here. So as you can see, we have a hotspot up in the North Country. And then so far, just in the first week, we have a lot of participation in Manchester's Mill Yard as well. So this is kind of a nice way to also see where people are riding. So then next year, when we're planning our breakfast stations or other celebrations, we can look at these areas and say, oh, maybe we should support these riders over here. Speaking of events, there are events taking place all across the state this year. Up in the North Country, we have some in Nashua, and then we have a few in our region. So in Manchester, we have 2 different breakfast stations. We'll have one on the Piscataquag Rail Trail. That one's being sponsored by REI in Bedford. We'll also have discounts at 88 Coffee in Manchester. And the Manchester Distillery will have a bike home happy hour celebration because it's often difficult to cross paths with people in the morning. So you might feel like you're the only one commuting that day. But in the afternoon, it's a good time to just slow down and kind of reflect on everything that you learned throughout the day. So it's a fun time to get together with other cyclists. We also wanted to make this event as inclusive as possible. So we worked with Manchester Parks and Rec to identify 4 different park and pedal locations. So if you live too far away to bike to work, we are encouraging you to drive to one of these locations, unload your bike, and then pedal the rest of the way to work. MTA is also once again offering free rides to anybody who brings their bike and uses the bike bus racks. This is a good way to say thank you and acknowledge the people that do use public transit with their bikes all year round. When they last did this promotion in May for Bike Month, they had 18 riders. So I am curious to see how many people are using this in the winter as well. And of course, winter biking, just like winter driving, has its different challenges. So REI will be hosting a free class at their new store in Bedford the week before Winter Bike to Work Day on February 2nd from 6 to 7 p.m. It's a free class. You don't have to register. You can just show up and they'll teach you some of the basics, what to wear, how to get your bike ready, some basic handling skills in the snow, things like that. And then the website also has the poster that you can download, and I printed a few out over there. We have some generic ones here and then some with the Manchester specific events if you want to hang those up. There's an opportunity to submit a photo. And then we just have all of our partners and sponsors listed. So we have the Bike Walk Alliance, Commute Smart, REI, all of the planning commissions, Bike the North Country. Yeah, and just a lot of the event sponsors. So it's not too late to host an event. If you know someone in your community that is interested in hosting a breakfast station or some kind of, warming event, you can just go to the website and fill out the form there, and then I'll put it on the map.
Thank you. Anybody here planning on riding the bike?
I rode mine, if you didn't see it downstairs.
Good. All right, is Dave and Zach?
Now we're up. Sorry about that.
Next up is overview of proposed 2024 regional safety performance targets with Dave and Zach with Southern New Hampshire.
No, that's not what I wanted.
Nope, I think you're good.
Okay, can everyone see that at home, full screen?
We're seeing presentation mode.
Okay, well, let's see in full screen here, so.
Go to display settings. And then duplicate slideshow for that.
How does that look for everyone at home?
That's looking
Looks
better.
good.
That's it.
Looks good.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Tilton, along with my colleague Zach Swick. We'll be presenting the safety performance measures for 2024. So, FAST Act continues the work that the Highway Safety Improvement Program has done in trying to reduce fatalities and significant injuries in all our public roadways. The FAST Act requires DOTs to measure and report performances in the following categories: safety, pavement and bridge, system performance and congestion, freight movement, and congestion mitigation air quality, also known as CMAQ. Today we'll be talking about PM1, which has to do with safety. The PM1 safety performance measures are done annually, every year. Other safety performance measures are done every 2 to 4 years. So when we're discussing safety, with safety measures, we're talking about 5 federally required safety measures: the number and rate of fatalities, the number and rate of serious injuries, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. These are the categories that Zach will be doing a deeper dive into a little later in the presentation. Oh, sure. All right. So that's still there.
Well, if you're gonna hide the whole thing, if you put it down.
Hide video panel, or is it floating media controls?
Yeah.
There it is. Thank you. All right. So once the state sets there's safety performance targets, then it's up to the MPOs to review those targets and to make a determination if they're going to support the state targets or if they want to set their own regional targets. For the 2024 PM1 safety performance measure targets, SNHPC recommends supporting all of the state targets with the exception of the regional fatality rate. For that one, we are recommending setting a regional rate for the fatality rate, which we'll discuss in a little more detail later. And now Zach will do a deeper dive into the data.
Good morning. This is going to be a bit of a repeat for our one commissioner slash TAC member, so I apologize for that. But for the rest of you, I'd like to give a nice, some general context when we give these numbers as opposed to just telling you numbers. Last time I dug into statewide fatalities, looking at things like helmet use and seatbelt use and fatalities. This time we're going to take kind of a national, international perspective to try to tell us where we are in the country. So let's start out with last year, sorry, 2 years ago now. The SNHPC region, there were 23 fatalities. The majority of these were either motorcycle or pedestrian, and then there were 124 serious injuries. The fatal crashes cost the SNHPC region about $41 million, and all crashes cost about $245 million. That's including things like wage, productivity losses, medical expenses, administrative expenses, etc. If you've been paying attention to the news, does anybody else hear that feedback? Could everybody online please mute yourselves? We're getting some weird feedback here.
And Suzanne.
Thank you.
Suzanne can.
Okay, much appreciated. If you were paying attention to the news, you might have seen a bunch of stories about how crash rates were up, deaths were up, all that sort of thing, especially during the pandemic. And we see that in the region. So the blue there is the 5-year moving average for the crash fatalities. You can see it going up. It's increased by 35% since 2014, and the national has increased by 20%. What makes this unusual, though, is we're an outlier in the rich world in terms of our increasing fatalities. There we have a list of number of countries in the OECD group that have at least 10 million people living in it. And there we can see the road fatalities per 100,000 residents beginning in 1995 going all the way up to 2021. And what you can see is in 1995, there were a lot of people that had a lot of fatalities. We were actually below places like Portugal and South Korea. But by the time we get out to 2020, 2021, we're still at about 13 fatalities per 100,000 people compared to places like most people around 3 to 5. And you say, well, we're never going to be the Netherlands because we have a very different system. Well, we just highlight Australia and Canada, countries that we think of ourselves as being similar to in terms of less densely populated. We're seeing rates that are 3 times as high. And here we go. This is looking at fatalities per capita, fatalities per registered vehicle, and fatalities per miles driven. Again, that's Australia in red and Canada in yellow. And here we see the different rates. And even when we account for things like how many people there are, the number of registered vehicles, how much driving there is, we're still way above these other countries. It would surprise even me if you said to me, Zach, Australia and Canada have a transportation system which is more similar to France or Germany than the United States. But that's what the case actually is. More so, the rate of pedestrian fatalities is increasing, and it's increasing 3 times faster than all others. And we now match where we were in 1980. And I'm going to read this quotation here because this is from the Federal Highway Administration, not the Bike Walk Alliance of America. The crisis of pedestrian fatalities on U.S. roads cannot be solved in isolation. It is a result of decades of emphasis on motor vehicle mobility and access at the expense of all other outcomes, all other modes. This emphasis causes negative outcomes, including vulnerable road user deaths and serious injuries, worsening air quality, inequitable access to opportunity, and low density sprawling development. And this comes from a report where they compare the U.S. modes versus those of Australia and New Zealand as a good comparison. And you can see our rates are much, much higher and increasing while theirs is continuing to decline. When I presented this to the commission last year at this point, there was a question from Gary from Francistown, and he said, have you seen anything about, deaths happening more at night or, somehow being, as a result of mobile or as manuals versus automatic transmissions. And I said, well, I knew they happened more at night, so I wasn't real sure. But after he said that, Adam sent me an article. This is from the New York Times, the Upshot, and dug into it. And you can see that the US, the increase in pedestrian deaths is happening at night and it's happening after 2010. You can see that there's that sharp increase where you have not seen that large increase during the day. Again, we don't see this in other countries. So this is pedestrian rate at night. Again, we can see it popping up there in the United States beginning in about 2010, where it's decreasing for all these other countries. The explanation that this article gives, well, one of the explanations it gives is that with the rise of the smartphone, and in the US, since we have more automatic transmissions rather than manuals, you have the ability to use your phone more when you're driving and therefore having more distracted crashes. That's not the only argument from the article, but that's its main focus. Whereas we have, Europe where 75% of cars are still manuals, as compared to the US. The problem with that is that the two there I've underlined, Oceania and Canada. Manuals are much less common in the US and Canada and Australia at very similar rates, but yet we still see very different outcomes. Australia and Canada have automatic transmissions, but they're also seeing declines while we see increases. I'm not saying that manuals are not any of the answer here. It's just that it's a very complicated situation that we're in. Just digging into the deaths at night, we definitely do see that. On the left are all vulnerable road user deaths. That's person walking, biking, personal conveyance, like a scooter or something like that. You can see the hour of it, the fatalities, and you see it increases about 5 o'clock, and that's where the peak. And then on the chart on the right, the blue is motorized fatalities, and the red is vulnerable road user fatalities. And you can see that the peak for the red, for the vulnerable road user fatalities, peaks later. It's happening later at night, as opposed to motorized. And here we have, again, blue is motorized fatalities and vulnerable road users in red. The red, and this is by month. So what months are happening? You can see for motorized, it's peaking again in the summer months when you expect more people are driving, more people are out and about. But it peaks for vulnerable road users in that November, December, January area. Now, these are not exactly apples to apples on the left, because on the left we have fatalities, on the right we have serious injuries, but the years are different. So on the left it's 2011 to 2021, on the right it's 2017 to 2022. So they're not exactly the same. But what we do see is that blue, again, is motorized fatalities on the left, vulnerable road user fatalities on the right there. I'm sorry, on the right axis. So on the left, we have fatalities, serious injuries. For fatalities, we see a separation where the serious injury, where the motorized and the VRU are not happening at the same time. The VRU are happening later. But when we look just at serious injuries, the peak is at the same time. It's that 3 to 6 hour. So there's something different about fatalities and the hour in which they occur versus serious injuries. There's more also going on here. If I told you that in 1971, between 1971 and 2019, the amount people drove in the US increased by 80%. So the average person today drives 80% more than they would have in 1971. And that tracks for the United States as well. So I'm sorry, for New Hampshire as well. On the right there, we have New Hampshire in blue, United States in gray, and this is VMT per capita. Again, it's very similar trend. And the only time we see it fall really is when gas prices go up. So here we have on the left, the left axis is the amount vehicle miles traveled per capita. On the right is the West Texas crude real dollar value per valuable. You can see when that gas price peaks, you see a decrease in driving. The only time when you don't see that is the pandemic, when driving dropped off. So what's another factor? Another factor. Let's see if I can hide this. These cars are very different than they were in the past. On the right, I'm sorry, on the left, we have, in the top left, we have weight. And then right of that is horsepower. Below that, we have, below left, we have acceleration, 0 to 60. And on the right, we have the percentage of the vehicles produced. So we can see the cars over time, right about, the oil crisis, the weight, the horsepower, the acceleration, all crashes as they have to deal, automakers were dealing with the fact that they had to, suddenly improve the gas efficiency of the cars. But since then, all the weight, the horsepower have increased, and the acceleration has decreased at the same time that the percentage of vehicles that are sold that are cars versus trucks has changed. We are now, the majority of cars that are now sold are trucks, and that includes things like SUVs, minivans, things that don't have a a sedan frame. Why does that matter? Well, what's going on here? There we go. Here's an example of how the vehicle's changed. We have the F-150, the #1 selling vehicle in America, the 1970s version with the current one. And you can see the difference in the total dimensions of the vehicles. And that matters because in a vehicle, and in crashes involving two vehicles, if one vehicle is 1,000 pounds heavier than the other, it has a 40 to 50% greater chance to kill the person inside the smaller one. An occupant of the vehicle, occupant of a car is 1.6 times more likely to die in a crash if the other vehicle is a pickup or versus another type of vehicle. And the fatality rate for pedestrians hit by an SUV or pickup is two to three times higher than that of pedestrian cars, passenger cars. So that's a lot of bad juju there. But we have started to move, or at least the federal government has started to move towards a different outlook, which is the safe system approach, which is actually included in the IIJA. And this is what other countries have been doing basically 20 years ago. Australia and New Zealand implemented an outlook like this into the early 2000s. And it includes things like, focusing on safer vehicles, safer speeds, safer roads, post-crash care, and safer people. It includes principles like death and serious injuries are unacceptable. Human beings make mistakes. Human beings are vulnerable, and responsibility is shared. Safety is proactive, and redundancy is crucial. And that last one is probably the most important. It's kind of the Swiss cheese mode of protection where you have multiple layers, because at some point you're going to, one of those layers will fail, but the next one will work. And we can see the safer speeds component in issues like this, So here we have, that graphic showing at what speeds is the person very likely to live. So if a car hits you at 20 miles per hour, there's about a 9 out of 10 chance that you will live. But as the speed increases, that rate will decrease. A pedestrian hit by a car going 35 miles per hour is 5 times as likely to die as one hit by going 20 miles per hour. And we can see this in our own data. So this is crashes from 2017 to 2022. These are on the left, we have all the crashes in parking lots this is in Manchester. Parking lots, we have all the bike ped crashes. We had 10 of those. None of them were serious injury or fatal. On Bridge Street, we had 11. And of those, about half were serious injury or fatal. And Bridge Street's posted speed limit is 30 miles per hour. We can even see that in more recent data. Last month of last year, a pedestrian was struck and a couple days later died at the intersection of Chestnut and Bridge Street. And what do we see that? It's December, it's nighttime, and the speed limit's a little bit higher. And now I'm going to go through the actual safety measures that we're going to be looking at today. As Dave mentioned, the first is the number of fatalities. We can see that it's kind of a little flat, but it has been going up in the last few years. We have here the targets are the X's, and the red is what actually occurred. So in 2019, the target was 18.2. We were actually a little bit above that. And we see as we extrapolate out here, we were expected to not meet our target for 2024. For fatality rate, here we have the SNHPC in red and the state in blue. And again, this is the one measure that we're adopting that's different from the state. And you can see why we're, historically, there's a big gap between where we are and where the state is with fatalities per VMT. And that's just because the state as a whole is more rural than the SNHPC area, and you see more deaths on rural areas per the amount of driving, just because you don't have things like perfectly aligned geometry for roads, over-engineered highways, or post-crash care is also not as good. Takes longer for the ambulance to get there. For this one, looks like we are on target to meet. We previously had a target of 0.75. Since the states went up, we adjusted it proportionally, and that came out to 0.795. So that's our regional target, and we're projected to hit it. Number of serious injuries has been going down. That's good over the last decade or so. There has been a slight uptick in the last few years, so we'll have to see if that's just noise, if that's a trend, if that continues. So here's our 5-year projection. I'm sorry, our 5-year extrapolation, and the different former targets were well underneath to meet that 2024 target of 0.5. For serious injury rate, we can see that we're mirroring the state, and that's good. That for everybody, serious injuries are going down, but again, there's that little tick up at the last end. And again, for this one, we're well on our way to meeting our target of 3.877 for 2024. Lastly, we have the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. You can see there's that big bump there in 2017. What that is there was a year before, I can't remember if it's one of those years before 2017, we had a year where we had a bunch of pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries. I don't know what happened that year, we just did. And that's where that bump came from. And we've been slowly working that out. So now that we get up to about 2020, that high number has been dropped out of the 5-year average. And that's good. So we're back down low, although we do start to see a tiny little tick up. So we'll have to see what happens with that. And again, we are well on our way to meet our target of 11.3 fatalities and serious injuries for 2024. And also for this, it's good to notice that the targets there you can see move around a lot, and as well as the actual observed numbers. And that's just reflects the fact that when we talk about pedestrian and bike fatalities and serious injuries, they're smaller numbers, so there's more variability that can occur. And I believe we're up to you now.
Yep, thank you, Zach. All right, so here we have a summary table that goes over some of the data that Zach just went through in a deeper dive. This is for the state of New Hampshire. And we see over to the left our 5 safety measures. To the right of the safety measures, we have the 2 most recent 5-year rolling averages, 2017 through 2021 and 2018 through 2022. To the right of our rolling averages, we have our recent and desired trends. The recent trends mark the direction that the numbers are going to when comparing the 2 most recent 5-year rolling averages. As we can see by the red box and the up arrows, 4 out of the 5 safety measures in New Hampshire are increasing. That is not good. We don't want to see an increase in fatalities and significant injuries. The desired trends show the direction that we do want to see those numbers going into. The good news is for the state of New Hampshire, non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries have gone down slightly. So hopefully that trend will continue into the future. Here we have a similar table, but this shows the SNHPC proposed regional safety performance targets. Once again, to the left, we have our 5 safety measures, followed by the 2 most recent 5-year rolling averages, and then our recent and desired trends. Now, for the SNHPC region, we see that our trend lines are going up for all 5 safety measures. Not an ideal situation. And to the right of that, we have the state targets and the SNHPC recommended targets. As we said earlier, SNHPC recommends adopting or supporting 4 out of the 5 state targets, with the exception of the fatality rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. For that, we would suggest adopting a regional target of 0.795. And as Zach mentioned, We got to that number by proportionally increasing our last fatality rate target to reflect the increase that the state saw, while also keep considering the differences in lane miles and characteristics of this region compared to the state. And so here is a table to show our track record. What is the reality? How close do we come to when we are setting these targets to the actual numbers? As Zach mentioned earlier, there is variability, especially with the smaller numbers like bike and ped fatalities and serious injury rate. But overall, I think we have a sound methodology for setting our targets. And finally, this is just our summary table. We have our 5 safety measures, the state's 2024 targets, and the SNHPC 2024 targets, and the SNHPC recommended actions. Once again, we are recommending supporting 4 out of the 5 state targets, with the exception of the fatality rate, which we recommend adopting a regional target of 0.795. And that's our presentation. Thank you very much. And Zach and I will answer any questions that the group may have.
I will say that, I think the additional graphs you put up there, that you got from thinking about Gary's question, made it, easier to see.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate it.
I'm wondering if he saw that article.
No, I don't know.
You'll have to ask him.
Question. Where do regions stand on the Vision Zero plan that I know we were doing with other regional planning agencies for that Safe Routes for All grant?
Yeah, Adam has been our liaison to that project and can probably speak more fluently about the current status. I know that they've gone through. Rockingham Planning Commission is the lead agency on behalf of the 4 NPOs. I know they've got their contract with Federal Highway, which took some time. And you know, Kristen, from having a direct award with Federal Highway, it could take some time to get through that process. That is now done. I believe they've gone through the consultant selection process, and am I correct that VHB has been selected to be the consultant on that? Yep. And I think they're going through the scope of the fee finalization VHB right now prior to getting started on. Adam, is there anything that I missed in there?
No, I mean, that's pretty much where things stand. We can, if you want to send an email offline, we can go over that further.
Thank you.
Mark had his hand up too.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to thank you for showing the results of the last several years. I don't think I've seen that slide before. My question is, has there been any, let's say, so you've evaluated how we've done against our targets. Has there been any response or result, whether for funding, for enhanced focus for those several targets that haven't been hit or haven't been that we haven't met the targets or haven't been below the targets? I'm babbling here, but I hope you get what I'm trying to ask.
In terms of like consequences, Mark?
Yeah, that's it. That's the word, consequences. Thank you.
There aren't any consequences for MPOs not hitting the targets. There are some consequences for the state not hitting their targets. And I believe, and I think Lee's on the call, and he was, yes. I think the state loses their ability if they don't hit their targets to flex HSIP funding, which is not something our state does anyway. We have not historically flexed any HSIP funding. So, and I think the state must do a vulnerable road user assessment if the bike head one is not
15% of all fatalities.
Yeah, and deploy a certain percentage of their HSIP funds at the state level to those types of projects. But those are state, consequences, so to speak. There aren't any consequences for MPOs not being targets. So there's no effect on our funding or anything like that in the region, but we still do need to track and report how we've done over time according to our targets and the system performance reports. So we want to be transparent about that, but we don't have any funding consequences in the region as a result of not achieving targets.
Okay, thank you.
Lee, is there anything you'd like to add to that discussion? You have your finger pretty close to the pulse of this too.
No, I think that's a good summary, Nate. That is correct. There are no financial consequences or otherwise for the MPOs when they fall short of their regional targets. Whereas the consequences that you talked about with the state are correct as well. And yes, I don't think New Hampshire has traditionally transferred any HSIP funds. So depending on how that evolves, I guess over time, that wouldn't be too much of a hardship. If that was the case, that they would be restricted from doing that.
Thanks, Lee.
Yep.
One of the other thoughts I have, it was interesting to see that we talked about before, how when the first spike came up, it was when cell phones became ubiquitous. Well, I was wondering if the 2017 year was when texting became the thing. I'm thinking about where I went from my job where growers had phones and you could call them, and then all of a sudden they didn't want to answer the phone, they had to have text. It's 2017, is that second bump when texting became the thing? So as part about how do we reduce these incidences, one of the aspects we might need to actually look at is how you could reduce them is that technology co-use with the driver. So before you had the car and you had the pedestrian, now you have the car with the tech. Now you have both entities that can cause a fatality that make our numbers skew. Both of them have this new technology that takes them away from the outer world and causes. And I think it's just as important as how the curve is or how the lines are or how the lights is. That to me, that's become a new critical factor in how to minimize these instances.
There are features that do exist. I can't remember that cars, like it has as a, I think it's more for essentially if you're falling asleep or something like that, but make sure your eyes are on the road, and if it doesn't, it bings at you. Some of that kind of passive stuff, but you would take some, there are technical, the technical solutions do exist. It would take real change and willpower and to implement those changes
for the people, for both the user and
the car maker.
Well, and over time, I think people, as they update their car, like, cars now have a text feature. You just say, text so-and-so, and you're not looking anywhere. You're just looking straight at the road, but you're just telling your car to text or phone or whatever. So I think as people update their cars, that will also improve.
Maybe I'm just confused. Maybe I don't understand that we're only tracking what has happened and don't really look for what the solutions, how to invent solutions to prevent it from happening. I was thinking that we were tracking as we were trying to imagine how to prevent more things that need to be tracked.
Right now, I think it's more that we can see that this is happening, and people will come up and say, this is the reason that's happening. Okay. And they'll give it, and we'll say like, well, probably not, it's probably part of it, but it's a much more complicated, interaction of things. And that's why we see it in this country, but we don't see it in other countries, even though, we share this trait with them and we share this with that, but for whatever reason, it's different. And that means that finding a solution is also gonna be much harder.
One of the things I was in Canada over the holidays. My in-laws live in Canada, and I do a lot of driving across at least southern Quebec and southern Ontario to get to Toronto, where my in-laws live. And I don't know what drives Canadian safety figures, but there's a stark difference between the US, and I would have to guess that part of that is that in the last decade or so, cameras, surveillance and automated enforcement cameras are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Red lights, automated speed enforcement. We would have our Google directions on, and it'd be like red light camera, next intersection, red light camera, next intersection, automated speed enforcement, next, 1 mile. So these cameras are everywhere in southern Ontario, and they're making lots of money, which is why they keep deploying more, because they're making lots of money off these things. It costs $100,000 to install one, and they're making tens of millions of dollars in ticket revenue in Toronto alone from the cameras that they have. So they're making lots of money off them, and they're everywhere. And I have to think that affects how people drive. It certainly affected how I drove, because I'm not breaking traffic laws, but I am very paranoid about making sure I'm not even going through a yellow light at the red light camera. I don't want a ticket to come in the mail, right? I'm watching the pedestrian countdown timer as I'm approaching the intersection to see how much time I have before the yellow light's gonna hit. Like, it changes the way you drive to be under kind of constant surveillance at every intersection. I would have to think that's affecting some of Canada's numbers, the thousands upon thousands of cameras that now exist for automated enforcement.
Threat of fine has always been my, I always agree that threats of fines was a great motivator.
Well, automated enforcement, I mean, like they're doing it automatically. They're just gonna take it in the mail.
Since the pandemic, people might have noticed that people have been driving worse and, running red lights, all that sort of stuff. I myself caught myself doing it yesterday a little bit. And part of that is because enforcement is way down, because both in terms of, police forces have way more to do, they're understaffed, all that, and people have figured it out. And so, there is something to be said for that.
I did note an interesting thing, so the pedestrian and the vehicular, like that time frame, that 3 to 6. That's generally, depending on where you are in the, that's generally the time you have more impaired drivers.
3 is really, okay.
Well, think about it. I mean, happy hours, you've got people who are operating in
Yeah,
the which will affect how they respond to.
Right.
the changes.
Alcohol rules might also be a big reason for some of these. I'm not familiar with, the different driving limits for some of these other countries, but that's, there are all these different interplaying forces.
Yeah, it'd be interesting on the camera angle, if you had a graph on how many of the countries that are scoring so low, how many of them do the camera?
I know that Australia and Canada both do.
Yeah.
And New Zealand does, but they weren't on there. But yes, and you can, I do know when I saw a New Zealand presentation, they did the little charts showing like, here's where we implemented seatbelts and it went down. And here's where we implemented, DUIs and blah, blah, blah. And they can see it does have, whether it's a causal relationship, they do kind of point to that.
And there was a little dip in the numbers I noticed when they really started enforcing the fines for the, the handheld fines. I was like, oh, it's about when, but once again, enforcement is not what it was 2 years ago.
Right.
By the way, the software that you mentioned also tells you whether there are police officers up ahead. So go on the highway and go 80 miles an hour, whatever, and it'll tell you when there's the police officers, so you know when to slow down. So I bet
it's the modern CB radio.
Yep. So some of these, they'll basically have a corridor where they'll say, it's just monitored by, for speed or whatever, and then they'll move the camera around. And then I suppose, Waze or whatever is then trying to keep up with that. So they're trying to fool that by, moving it around, but I guess, I don't want to take one person to report it, or whatever it is.
We will likely see more cameras being deployed across the United States as well. There's a state law in New Hampshire that prohibits it, so I don't think it's gonna happen in New Hampshire anytime soon. But I did see a report from New York State DOT that they deployed like last month, a number of work zone automated speed enforcement cameras at work zones on the Adirondack Northway, on I-90, on some of their major highways where they have work zones. New York State is doing automated speed enforcement just in work zones as a test.
Makes sense.
Any other questions, comments?
So we obviously can't take a motion on, but supporting, but does the people present, do they have a feeling about whether they would recommend?
To recommend supporting to the MPO?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I would hope that the TAC would, yeah.
Do we don't have a consensus still, right?
Well, we cannot take a vote, but I believe we can do a consensus that. Right?
The consensus of those members present.
Well, it's a consensus of these members present, approve going ahead with those numbers.
As a recommendation to the MPO, yes.
Got a thumbs up from Mark to, Kristen and Andrew, thumbs up, George, got a big thumb there. All right, thank you, thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. The next, David Tilton, Southern New Hampshire. Planning Commission, great vehicle parking inventory.
Okay, there we go. All right, can everyone see that at full screen at home?
Yes, yeah, yes, David.
Thank you very much. I'll skip over the introduction since I was already just sitting here a couple minutes ago. Today I'll be doing a brief overview of the truck parking inventory for the SNHPC region, focusing on the community stakeholder survey results. All right, so through our UPWP, we were tasked with inventorying truck parking, freight truck parking in the SNHPC region. So the reason, the way we're going about doing this is we're going to identify publicly and privately owned commercial truck parking areas. Then once we identify those, we want to document the facilities, the amenities they have, parking spots, restrooms, showers, high-speed diesel fuel, canopies that are high enough for trucks to go under to fuel up, things of that nature to see what we have in our region. And then finally, we will analyze the data and prepare a report with our findings. And so this is a map to kind of put things in perspective of the SNHPC region with all the major corridors shown. These are the corridors that freight trucks will be picking up and distributing goods and materials throughout the region, which is the economic lifeblood for our region and nationwide. So in the summertime, I did an overview of this project and kind of highlighted why this is a national and local crisis. Some of the numbers nationally and within the state for truck parking. And I didn't want to do that over again, but doing some research for this presentation, I came across these two quotes that I thought were very important to kind of illustrate, the severity of this problem, and also that it's a multifaceted problem that's probably going to take different solutions. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So first we have Todd Spencer from the president of the Owner-Operated Independent Drivers Association. And he stated that most folks probably don't realize that 70% of American freight is transported by truck. Yet incredibly, there's only one parking spot for every 11 trucks on the road, which is illustrated with this illustration to the right. The other flip side of that is Ellen Voy, founder of the Women in Trucking Association, stated the top reason female commercial drivers leave the industry is because they're concerned about their personal safety. So with these two quotes, we are showing the fact that we don't have enough physical parking spots for the number of freight vehicles on the road. But at the same time, with staffing shortages throughout many industries, we have a reason why we're going to see a potential staffing shortage for commercial truck drivers, for the female population, because not only do we not have enough physical spaces, but a lot of the physical spaces we have are not safe and secure spaces. These drivers have hours of service that they're federally required, that they have to follow. They need a place to pull over and sleep and rest and feel safe and secure while doing so. And we currently have a lack of those type of parking spaces. So for the outreach efforts, for this portion of the project, we developed 3 surveys. The community stakeholder survey, which we'll be discussing today. This was sent to municipal officials such as town administrators, planners, emergency and highway department personnel. And then our commercial driver survey, that was sent to local and national freight companies, moving companies, companies that move long distance using large vehicles. Some of those organizations that we sent to was the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association, and for a more regional approach, the New Hampshire Motor Transport Association. And finally, we developed a private facility owner survey. This will be conducted as an interview style when we do our tours of the private facilities a little later in the winter. So now we'll go into the community stakeholder survey. So for this outreach effort, for this particular survey, we sent 75 invitations in the beginning of January to the different departments and municipal officials that I went over in the last slide. This is a 15-question survey, which took respondents approximately under 7 minutes to complete. And as of last Tuesday, we received 13 responses, which represents 7 of our 14 communities. We scheduled the survey to close at the end of the month. So the first 5 questions of the survey were more of getting to know who the respondents were: name, municipality, department, phone number, email. So question 6 was the first question to get to the heart of the matter. So that's where we'll start here today. And question 6 states, within your community, do you have any publicly owned parking areas, spaces that are designated or are used by commercial truck drivers? These could be parking rides, town-owned parking lots, etc. So for the respondents that we got a resounding 100% no throughout the region. So questions 7 and 8 were follow-up questions to question 6. If you answered yes to question 6, question 7 and 8 asked you if you could provide details about that particular area that you said yes to here. Those details were address, number of parking spots in total, commercial driver parking spots, and any rates or rules or regulations, like how many hours a vehicle could be parked there without having to move. Since we did not get any yeses, respondents went to straight to question 9, which we will do here. And so question 9 asked survey respondents if they feel their community has more than enough parking spots available for commercial trucks, adequate amount of commercial truck parking, or not enough commercial truck parking spaces. We saw that the majority of respondents, 40% of them, answered that their community does not have enough commercial truck parking spaces. Interesting enough, 60% respondents combined and felt that their community either had an adequate amount or more than enough. Question 10, has the development of manufacturing centers and or warehouses in your community led to a noticeable increase in commercial truck traffic? We had a majority respond no here as well, 84%, with only 15% responding yes. This will be interesting to see if we get more respondents from other communities, if this the dynamic of this graph changes at all. And on to question 11. Which of the following locations within your community does unauthorized truck parking occur? So we have a number of responses here. Local commercial areas such as retail parking lots was the majority at 38%. And then we had a 4-way tie between none of the above, on local streets near freeways, public parking lots, and I don't know. That was followed by local streets near warehouses with a 0% response rate for local parking rides. Now, that is not too surprising. During the research, I did come across that I don't believe any of our parking rides in the region are set up for commercial truck. They don't have the spaces designed for them, even though ones like our bigger parking rides, like off exit 5 in Londonderry, does have the geometric configuration because they have buses coming in and out of there. But there is no parking spaces that are designed or dedicated to commercial trucks. So this was one of our open-ended questions. Question 12, in the space below, please list the known location that unauthorized truck parking has occurred in your community. Please be detailed as possible. And we have a number of responses here. And as you can see, we put up a map in the lower right-hand corner that I hope everyone can see. The respondents, the communities that the respondents represent are shown here in the darker purple color. So these responses are going to be very community orientated. So we have Wasson Pond Rec area, ramps to Route 101, private business near Route 101, which makes sense being a major transportation corridor in our region. Oftentimes we have deliveries on our Main Street corridor that are forced to block traffic for side streets or main roadways as there is no adequate parking for them to complete their delivery, which we do see more in our downtown and densely urban areas as deliveries, and even your Amazons are trying to make deliveries as quick as possible. And sometimes they'll just double park or in the road with their flashers while they're going into making deliveries. Only issue we currently run across is commercial trucks being parked by owner operators at private residences, which run afoul of our current zoning regulations. Not aware of any locations. Gas station at exit 2, Route 101, Commercial Court, King Street, and town parking lot, Abbott Court. So this will give us an idea of areas to look for, and possibly in a future date, if the data compiled by this report points us in that direction, to possibly look for potential, is there a room there, or is there any desire there to somehow get additional truck parking? All right, so for question 13, is unauthorized truck parking in your community leading to other problems such as narrowing of roadways, increased congestion, barriers preventing municipal operations like street sweeping and snow removal? Thankfully, 92% of the respondents said no. So currently, for the communities that are represented by the respondents, this is not an issue in the majority of their communities. Question 14, are you aware of any public or private projects being planned in your community that will increase the number of commercial truck parking spaces? Once again, we had the majority, 83% saying no. They're not aware of any plans. Now, this is an interesting question and kind of points to one of the problems. We don't have in the pipeline really any sort of developments that will go to be it public or private, that will go to creating a solution for this problem. Even with some of our warehouse developments, the warehouses for their parking spaces are not setting aside dedicated areas for these trucks to just rest. If they have a delivery time, if they get to a warehouse before their scheduled delivery time, there's no place for them to go within the warehouse property. For the most part, they have to find a local area to pull over so they can waste the time until they get to that scheduled delivery time. And our final question was an open-ended question, and we designed this one to try to capture any thoughts that we may have missed, but is on our respondents' mind. So we asked them to please share any additional thoughts regarding commercial truck parking in your community. And once again, we have the map up in the top right corner to show the communities that the respondents is represented. And some of the responses we got were planning development or new business. That consideration goes into how deliveries will be accomplished. Chester is not geared up for any form of commercial truck parking. And while I'm not aware of any current commercial truck parking issues, I think it could become a problem for the town to address if a demand for it was to suddenly occur. We currently do not have any public parking lots that could handle this, and I do not have any ideas for a solution. Perhaps if the root cause comes from the commercial sector, then the solution should come from there as well. That is an interesting statement, and I would have to agree with that. I think that there is going to have to be some sort of public-private partnership or give and take between the two entities to get to the root of this problem, because it does affect both the public and the private industries. So here is a map, and this is just a taste of what we're going to be doing for the next phase, but I thought this kind of brought the point home about what we're dealing with here. This is a map of our region. The two green dots in the upper north part in Hooksett represent the two rest areas on 93, the northbound and southbound rest areas. The red dots represent known, mostly just gas stations and diners that allow for truck parking. There's no real lot that is dedicated to that. And most of these diners, from what we can tell from public information, do not have a lot of facilities or amenities that truck drivers do need or would look for when they're doing a long break. Things such as high-speed diesel gas pumps, showers, which would be huge. APU hookups, so they don't have to keep their vehicle idling, but could use heat, AC, electrical products in their car. Food and drink options, restrooms even for some of them. And so this kind of into the other point to the west of the Merrimack River, as far as commercial truck parking go, it's a virtual desert in our region. Everything is clustered to the east. And so for some next steps, the data we collect, if anyone's interested, we'd be more than happy to share with stakeholders, municipal officials, and other RPCs. We're going to continue collecting survey data from our communities and our drivers, as well as starting to conduct site visits and interviews with public and private facility owners, so we get a sense of what they have at their facilities and if there's any plans to increase their capacity to allow for truck parking, especially for overnight or long rest breaks. We'll collect additional data on amenities offered to commercial drivers at parking areas, including rates and also hours that they're allowed to be there. Some of them have rules and regulations. There's one that I know of that is shown on the map before that has a sign that says no overnight parking. So the drivers could park there. I don't know if it's enforced, but they do at least have a sign up that prohibits overnight parking in the commercial driver dedicated parking spots. Finally, we'll create a report that details our findings, analysis, and recommendations. And so that's my presentation. I would like everyone to please, if anyone would like to take the survey, that is the link there. You could copy and paste that link into your browser and take the survey, or contact me at the information provided below, and I'd be happy to send a link. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as soon as I can get this. Ooh, don't want to do that.
You want me to stop share?
Yep. All right.
Any questions, comments?
I forget, are we just looking at our region only for where they can park, or are we looking at where drivers wish they could park?
Well, right now, we're tasked with doing a truck parking inventory. So we're trying to see what we have in the region. Now, from that data, that may spur additional studies where we look at these areas could have potential for commercial truck parking, or even if there was any appetite, you could see if there was any way to convert some of the parking ride spots, especially ones that are underutilized, take up 2 spots and make it for a dedicated commercial truck parking. Now, there would be no amenities at those places, but at least would be a place for a driver to get off the road for even a short period of time while they're trying to make their scheduled delivery time, or even if they're drowsy and just need a break.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Next on the agenda, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission website updates, Ben Hebert, Regional Mobility Manager.
Thank you. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Herbert. I'm the Regional Mobility Manager here with the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. I'm going to show you everybody some of the updates I've done to our website regarding transportation services as well as mobility management. Just some background, as a mobility manager, my 2 main roles is helping people get connected to transportation services and also working with transportation services to get the word out about them and make the public more known about the services that they provide. Because even though there is a large variety of services within this region, a lot of people don't know about the services available to them. So,
Hey, Ben, can you make sure you're sharing the screen?
oh, yeah. Thank you for that. So a couple months ago, we had received feedback from a vendor about the way that our transportation webpage and mobility management web pages weren't necessarily easy to find. They were kind of complicated, difficult to navigate, and just weren't very user friendly. This is important to me because, like I said, as a mobility manager, making transportation services known throughout the region is big for me. And when your website isn't clear about the services available, that's something that has to be fixed. So myself and my colleagues worked on updating both the transportation pages as well as mobility management web pages. And I can show those off right now. The first thing we did was it used to take about 2 to 3 clicks just to find these web pages. Now you can find them instantly by just clicking transportation services. And on this website, it highlights, what transportation means to the community, the benefits of it. Then also goes into the 5 types of services that are highlighted in this family of web pages. That being proposed rail service, bus service, demand response services, micromobility, and volunteer driver programs. Then also at the bottom, you can find resources on finding transportation, such as using the I Need a Ride function, which people can just go in, send a request for help finding transportation, and that would get in touch with them directly, using our updated transportation directory, or just reaching out directly to me. Now let's go in and show what each of these web pages look like. Proposed rail service is about the Capital Corridor project, which, as I'm pretty sure, is currently dead in the water. That's the best way to put it. That's why it's called proposed rail service and not rail service. The majority of my work was done for bus service, demand response service, and volunteer driver programs. And so on these web pages, it gives a quick introduction to, bus service itself. They all have a little map that shows where within the region bus service is available. And just a quick tangent, when I say the region, I'm talking about both the SNHPC region as well as the Regional Coordinating Council region. It's an important difference because while I'm an employee of Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, I'm a representative of the Regional Coordinating Council. And that region is mostly similar to SNHPC, with the exception that it also includes a couple of communities that are in the westernmost part of the Rockingham Planning Commission's region. So you'll see stuff like Raymond, Sandown, Danville, Hampstead, Atkinson, Plastow, and Salem being highlighted. It then also defines some key terms that the general public might not be familiar with, such as fixed route bus service, deviated fixed route bus service, and intercity bus service. And then below this is where you find information on each service. The original webpage would just say, these are the bus services in this region, and then it would just give bullet points that are also links with no information whatsoever. So now it tells you about what communities they serve within the region, what communities are served outside of the region. So for example, the Boston Express, the intercity bus service, it serves the communities of Londonderry and Salem. And then outside of the region, it also serves Boston, Massachusetts, of course. And you can find links to get to the website, as well as to the transportation directory, which goes a little bit more in depth as to information about that, as well as the page number, which would be down here on page 9. You can find it right there. It also highlights Concord coach lines, the Salem Shopper Shuttle provided by CART, the MTA bus service, and the MTA paratransit service. And you can also find the MTA short range transit plan under here as well. And this is the layout for majority of web pages that I worked on. So if you go to demand response service, it's the same thing. You got the map over here highlighting where they're available throughout the region. And then highlights all the services available, such as the Atkinson Elder Services, which is a town-owned service for the town of Atkinson, CART, Easter Seals, and Granite State, which is a statewide service. And if you'll notice up in the map, even though I have statewide services, I didn't highlight every single town because statewide services aren't as easily accessible as regional services. So putting up a map that says every single town is served is kind of stretching it. And then, yeah, it talks about the shuttle services provided by MTA, the Meals on Wheels services, both for Hillsborough County, Rockingham County, Monadnock Adult Daycare Center, which I learned about for the first time making this because that serves Francistown. Francistown is not a part of my region. And then also services provided by the VA, as well as the Wyndham Senior Van. And then I'll give one more look at the volunteer driver programs webpage. We kept the statistics about the impact they make on the state of New Hampshire because a lot of people's lives are very dependent on volunteer driver agencies. You look down here, just the service area that they have throughout the region is large. And there's also links on how to start a volunteer driver program because it, like it's in the name, it's a volunteer organization. So I wouldn't say it's easier, but it's much more of a grassroots project that you can start within a municipality. Then you have services highlighted such as the American Cancer Society, the caregivers, the community caregivers of Derry, the Greater Salem caregivers, and a bunch of other services too. And that is what the transportation web pages look like now. Moving on to the mobility management web pages, it brings you to this new web page about transportation coordination. And this is actually really important because mobility management is centered in transportation coordination, because the whole mobility management network is about transportation services being in coordination with each other to help people get to where they need to go. Like this graphic, if that's what an uncoordinated network looks like, all different services running in all different directions. You know, that's why you think, like, if I think about trying to get east and west in New Hampshire, the most common thing we hear is taking the bus all the way down to Boston, taking the bus all the way back up to the seacoast. That's an uncoordinated network. But if there was an existing coordinated network that was running east and westbound, that would be an efficient way of getting people across the state. And so it kind of gives you sort of a synopsis of what each of the web pages in this family is about. So of course, myself, mobility management, community assistance being the resources that are available, as well as our regional coordinating council. As for these web pages, the mobility management web page is mostly the same. I guess the major difference is when you open it, the first thing you see is my face staring at you. And then when you go down to the bottom, you also have the newsletters that I put out quarterly throughout the year. RCC 8 and statewide coordination. This is our new homepage for the Regional Coordinating Council, where you can find the coordinated transportation and human services plan, if I got that correct. And then also meeting minutes and a bunch of other important stuff regarding the RCC. And at the bottom of this, you can also find all the RCCs that exist throughout the state, as well as information on the statewide coordinating council. And then community assistance is where a lot of the materials that I put together are located. So you can find stuff as brochures, the directory posters, little flyers on funding information, and as well as survey work done as well. And then, yeah, I need a ride thing wasn't really changed, but I'll show it anyways because it's been brought up. Like I said, this is where people can go in and request help finding transportation. So they just put in their name, where they're traveling from, where they need to go, when their ride is, and then what the ride is for, wheelchair accessibility, and then any information that they wish to share with me. And then when they would put that in, it just goes straight to my inbox, and then I'm in touch with them instantly. So this has always been on here, and this remains unchanged, but it makes more sense now that it's in this family of assistance with finding transportation.
You get a lot of requests for that?
So this has been in here for about a year, or I should say year and a half. So throughout the first fiscal year, I only ever had one person ever use this. So far during this fiscal year, I think I've had about 5 to 6. So, you know, 5 people isn't a lot, but when you think about what it's coming from being one person, it's definitely gaining traction, and the whole network itself is gaining traction too. So it's important to have all this information out there at the start as this network is building and gaining traction, because as more people are going to start using it, they'll already have the information there available to them.
I think you put a button right on our homepage too, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Tammy. Yep, they can also just go down here and just see, I need a ride. Oh, that's me. I do need a ride. And then it takes you straight there.
It'd be nice for the municipalities to have their own transportation.
Yeah. There's a ton of information here. Yeah.
Even just that I need a ride. Because I think there's a, you know, I know that when I was in Hartford and Derry Zone and all of that, and I know when I was in Derry, we did get calls about, you know, how do I find a ride? And we get inquiries once in a while.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we were able to connect them with CART, but in the communities that don't have that, you know, the town that I live in is not represented on any of those maps. So it would be nice for people in those communities to know that there are the volunteer ride opportunities where they can connect with caregivers if they need to.
Yeah, and that's the usefulness of the community assistance webpage, because on here is the directory that you can also have on your website, as well as a poster for your town on this website as well. That's not the posters.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have the thumbnail if you want, but you probably want the actual posters. But yeah,
Take it off.
yeah, take all of them if you want, but you scroll down enough and you'll find dairy right there.
Yeah, yeah,
So-
but yeah, even, yeah, the towns that aren't represented can still, those residents can still find rides
Mhm.
through you, which is nice.
Yeah. Even if I'm not like their regional mobility manager, they can still get in touch with me because I know all the other ones in the region, so I can point them to the right person.
Resources.
Mhm. Any questions, comments, praises, grievances?
Well, no, that reminds me, I have noticed recently, well, I did notice that the website had changed and how much I had liked it, so I like being reminded that I have to tell you how much I like the changes in it. Especially like, I find that new email that we get, just the way it's laid out, it makes it way easier to read. So even though you hadn't heard me before tell you that I liked the changes, I like the changes. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
If you stop sharing, you can see the viewers and see if there's questions there.
It's way easier to find stuff when it's so easily laid out.
Anything else? Any questions? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Do we have any anything of other business is there is a Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission TAC membership available. If anybody is interested, I'm sure they can contact the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission and get a copy. Anything else?
Bruce, I would just, a brief update on the 10-year plan. You know, we talk about the 10-year plan often and focus on it during the Gasset phase of the 10-year plan. The Gasset phase is over. But there are two other phases of the 10-year plan. Gasset sends their version of the 10-year plan to the governor. The governor makes any changes he sees fit, and then it goes to the legislature. And the governor, just a couple of days ago, completed his review of the 10-year plan, and he did actually make some changes that are somewhat noteworthy. So the governor removed about 6 of the CMAQ projects that Gasset had included in the 10-year plan. So the 5 of those were EV related CMAQ projects. One of those was in our region, the Market Basket Chargers in Manchester. So those projects are coming out of the 10-year plan in the governor's version. The governor also removed a project in the city of Portsmouth that's a multi-use path. So 6 total CMAQ projects removed by the governor, one of those being in our region, the Market Basket Chargers in Manchester. And he redeployed funds to a few different things, adding about $2.5 million of funding to the Hampton Branch Rail Trail. In the seacoast part of the state, there's a rail trail in development on the former Hampton Branch rail line. $2.5 million of funding being added to that project. $3.8 million of funding being added to the Federal Transit Administration 5339 program for transit capital projects. And one of those transit capital projects that will be funded with those dollars is a new maintenance facility for Coast, which is the transit provider in the seacoast part of the state. Coast, the bus service. Is it the Cooperative Alliance for Seacoast Transportation? They will be getting a new, or some of that funding will be deployed for a new maintenance facility for Coast. And then 2 additions to the FTA 5310 program, an addition of $2.2 million for mobility management services around the state, as well as $1 million for statewide transportation demand management to support and promote shared ride activities. I'm not entirely sure what that will encompass at this point, but so moral of the story, 6 CMAQ projects coming out of the 10-year plan, including that Market Basket Chargers in Manchester, and then additional funding being added to the Hampton Branch Rail Trail, as well as FTA 5339 and 5310 funds. So it now, the governor's version of the 10-year plan goes to the state legislature. It always gets the year, the House, it becomes a House bill named after the year. So the 10-year plan is House Bill 2024 in this cycle. Because we're in 2024, and it will start with a public hearing in the House Public Works and Highways Committee. I do not know when that will be scheduled for, but that will be the first consideration by the state legislature. So if and when we learn about the date of that public hearing, we can certainly put that up on our social media and stuff, and people, it is a public hearing. So just like the Gassett hearings, anybody interested in the public, any town officials that may wish to testify, have the ability to go and testify in front of the House Public Works and Highways Committee on what they are considering the 10-year plan, which is the governor's version of the 10-year plan. So that's their starting point, and they can and likely will make some changes to finalize their version of the 10-year plan. So more to come on that.
Nate, could hypothetically, could the legislature throw all those things back in that were taken out? But the governor has to sign it eventually.
It eventually needs to be signed into law, which likely would be in June. They typically try to sign it into law before the end of the state fiscal year. So typically it's signed mid to late June by the governor. It works its way through the House Public Works and Highways Committee, the full House, then it goes to the Senate Transportation Committee, where they'll have a public hearing, then the full Senate, then to the governor for his signature. So yes, the legislature can make changes as they see fit. Whether or not the governor would agree with those changes and remains to be seen, but typically they'll have those discussions. So the 10-year plan is not over yet. It's just starting the final phase of the process, which is the legislative phase.
And it looks like Lucy put in the chat a link for that.
That's correct, Sylvia. I put the link in there, and as Nate said, this is the opportunity through the legislative process for communities and individuals to participate in that, and obviously offer comments. The details that Nate just went over are also on the website there as well.
That's all I had, Bruce.
That was all a reallocation. He didn't add any funds.
No, I think he basically kind of removed some of those EV projects. I tended, in his letter, in his transmittal letter, he noted that the EV projects that he cut were among the more expensive EV projects.
Yeah.
And so he did not cut all of the EV projects. There are a number of EV projects that are still in the 10-year plan, proposed to be CMAQ funded. I think what we looked at here, Bruce, is really a redeployment of the funds from the projects that he cut into those other projects.
Thank you. Any other business?
Motion to adjourn.
What?
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, consensus to adjourn?
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Consenting? Good. Thank you.
See you next month.
Have a good day.